Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last lecture for the Wild West Week. I'm Candace Vincent. I'm John's assistant in the education department. John had to take the morning off, so he left me here with all you good people. But we'll do everything just we'll do everything just like John would want us to. We're fortunate that Mary Stockwell has joined us today to share the story and the history of how Ohio's 5 major tribes were moved to west of the Mississippi. The name of the session is The Other Trail of Tears, The Removal of the Ohio Indians. Mary has lived most of her life in the 12 by 12 square block carved out around Fort Miamis on the Maumee River that Anthony Wayne purchased from the Indians in the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. She got her love of history from her father, John Stockwell, and her love of storytelling from her mother, Elizabeth Schultz Stockwell. She has her master's and doctorate in history from the University of Toledo. She taught and was the department chair at Lourdes University and also worked as a technical writer before receiving 2 Earhart Foundation fellowships from the William L. Clements Library at the University of Michigan. Yeah, that's a long sentence, and has been full-time writer ever since. Mary drove in this morning from that 12 by 12 square mile of property. So I just like you, if you wouldn't mind to turn off the ringers of your phone and help me in welcoming Mary.
Nice introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks to John and to Candace. And what a nice looking group. This is pretty great. It's a Friday morning. It's sunny out there. Okay, excellent. I have to tell you just one thing about my father. He was of Irish descent. So every dinner table meeting was what the English had done to the Irish. So that's where I got my history love from. My mother used to say, now your children are also English, John. And he would say, no, we were English up until Henry VIII, and after that, we were Irish. So that's the world I come from. Everything was a story about the past. I have to tell you one thing about my mother. She was an actress. She was an actress, a director, a professor. So between those two, the whole family got a love of history that is just with me always. I don't know when you drive down any road in Ohio, if you're remembering what happened here when, but that's what I do. But I tried to not get in an accident. Don't look, just go forward on these straight roads laid out in Ohio. I have to tell you something now, back to being a professor. When I was a professor, all I had to say was 2 words to get my students excited. Not no test, no homework. Andrew Jackson. Oh, yeah. If I said Andrew Jackson to my students, the whole room went wild, and they would tell me how much they hated him. We hate him, Dr. Stockwell. We hate him. We hate him. Why do you hate Andrew Jackson? I would say, he won the Battle of New Orleans. We have the Mississippi River and all points west because of him. He was for the common man, the little guy, the nobodies. He broke up the Bank of the United States, which was corrupt and corrupting Congress. Isn't he a great guy? Why do you hate him? We hate him, Dr. Stockwell, because he made the Cherokee leave Georgia and go west on the Trail of Tears. And for that, we will hate him for the end of time. Don't even talk to us about him. Slave? They didn't hate him for that. They hated him for what he did to the Cherokee. And I never had the courage to tell them, because I was researching the topic, oh, there's a lot more people than Andrew Jackson involved in this. There are a lot more tribes than the Cherokee. And I now would say this to them because the book is done, so I could go back and tell my students, would it surprise you if I told you that probably the majority of Americans, definitely the majority of people in Ohio, did not want this to happen, were against the removal of the Indians? And would it surprise you if I told you there were an awful lot of people in these tribes who wanted to go west and demanded to go west? The story is way more complex than I ever imagined it to be. And it's, well, I'll tell you the conclusion I come to, and you see if you come to the same conclusion. If I had to pick a person to start the story of the Trail of Tears, I wouldn't pick Andrew Jackson. I'd pick Tecumseh. Tecumseh. Remember him, the great chief, beloved today. They just opened a state park in honor of him down farther south. He lived in he was born in 1768. He was a Shawnee, born in Ohio. But around the year 1805, he comes up with an idea, and this is his idea. I'm going to unite all the tribes into one huge confederation. We're going to own all the land in common. And I'm going to secretly go throughout the Midwest and maybe the South, and I'm going to get all the Indians on my side, and we are going to be one great people, and we're going to stop the advance of the Americans. It's our land. We're not going to sell it anymore. His brother, nicknamed the Prophet, was allowed to go out in the open, and the Prophet preached to the Indians, we're going to be one people cut off from the Americans. We're not going to trade with the white man. We're going to go live the traditional life we once knew before anybody got here from some other continent. So Tecumseh's going in secret, getting this confederation together. His brother's out in the open. What are they trying to accomplish? Tecumseh's goal is to actually get a piece of territory and turn it into an Indian nation state. This is it. I put the red star for Lakeside, Chautauqua. He wanted Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and much of Minnesota. That's the old Ohio country. He said, this is going to be an Indian nation state. You know, Ohio's already in the Union in 1803, but he starts working on this in 1805, and he works on it till 1815. How is he going to accomplish this? I'm going to pick a day, he tells his followers. I'm going to pick a day. It's probably going to come late 1811, early 1812, and I'm going to send to all my followers a message. Rise up this day, kill every American settler, kill all the women, kill all the men, kill all the children, kill the livestock too. We will so totally shock the Americans, they'll go racing back across the Ohio, they'll go racing across the Appalachians toward the Atlantic where they belong. And this country, the Ohio country, belongs to us. It's our nation state. What goes wrong? We're here. We're here, aren't we? Something goes wrong. William Henry Harrison. He's the president everybody laughs at and says he was only president for a month. He's much more important than that. William Henry Harrison is governor of the Indiana Territory. That's all the land west of Ohio. And he figures out what's going on. He hunts Tecumseh down, and he says, you come to my capital, Vincennes, and you tell me what you're up to. And Tecumseh comes, and he says, I'm putting a confederation together. I'm going to win a nation state. I mean no violence or harm to you, but get ready. And Harrison said, you're going to use war to do this. This is how you have to do it as a Shawnee warrior. I'm not going to allow it. And they came to blows in the summer of 1810 in Vincennes. Tecumseh pulled a hatchet on Harrison, and Harrison drew his sword. And then they both said, we will have to fight a war, I bet, someday to end this once and for all. In 1811, Tecumseh goes south to talk to the Creek Indians in Alabama. And that's Harrison's chance. Harrison takes an army up to Tippecanoe. That's a place you can go visit in Indiana. It's still a deserted place and spooky if you go up there. And the prophet is in charge of all of Tecumseh's warriors, thousands of them, and he says to Harrison, okay, we'll disperse. We'll go home. And then dawn on the morning of November the 7th, the prophet's men and all of Tecumseh's warriors attack Harrison. That's the Battle of Tippecanoe. Tippecanoe and Tyler too. And Harrison wins. And he disperses the Indians, and he lets them know, don't try any massacre. Do not try this at all. This country belongs to the United States of America. Tecumseh comes back. It's early 1812. He realizes, I can't strike the Americans. I can't get that country of my own. But something is about to happen, the War of 1812. About a few months after Tecumseh gets back and all his warriors are dispersed, we, the United States, declare war on Great Britain. Remember why we do that? What are we mad about? The British Navy is out along the Atlantic, taking our ships, kidnapping our sailors. They don't want us trading with Napoleon. But they're also causing trouble out in the West. And when James Madison, the president, goes to Congress, he said, We're going to fight Great Britain for 3 reasons. Taking our ships, they can't tell us who to trade with. Stealing our sailors, these are our citizens. And that trouble with Tecumseh out in the west, the British are behind all of this. And we have to break free of this stranglehold that these people have around us. So we declare war on Great Britain. Tecumseh realizes this is my chance. He goes right up to Canada, to Fort Malden, right across the river from Detroit. And he tells the British, I will fight with you. I'll bring all my men with me. I'll get my thousands of men back dispersed at Tippecanoe, but you have to promise me something. You get me that country, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. You get me the old Ohio country, and that's an Indian country. And when you negotiate a peace, you get that for me. And the British said, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll fight this war to give you that country. It'll be a buffer between the Americans and Canada. This is a horrible war out on the western frontier. We're fighting back east. Washington's going to be burned to the ground. But out west, the future of America is being determined. Tecumseh wins almost every battle in 1812, and then things turn against him. In 1813, 2 men are appointed to defeat him. William Henry Harrison gets command of the Army of the Northwest. He comes up to a place called Fort Meigs. You can see it on the Maumee River, not far from where I live. He defeats Tecumseh. Jackson comes onto the world stage. Andrew Jackson is given the job of commanding the armies in the Southwest. He is to defeat Tecumseh's allies, both the Creek Indians and the British, and he wins. We win. At least on the battlefield, we have won the whole western country. The war is winding down. It's 1814. We've won in the West. Our representatives go to a place called Ghent in Belgium. Great men. John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay have to fight for us. They walk into the negotiations with the British for peace, and they say, well, we fought this war mainly for shipping, so let's talk about ships. Guess what the British say? Who cares about the ships or the sailors? We won't interfere with you anymore. We want that western country, and we want you to give it to the Indians. It's an Indian state. Our negotiators almost had nervous breakdowns. What are you talking about? This is our country. We defeated Tecumseh. But the British held out for many, many months trying to win a homeland for the Native Americans. And finally they gave up. Tecumseh was dead. Who's going to run this big country? And we signed a peace treaty called, again, the Treaty of Ghent. Now, I'm not recommending that you read the Treaty of Ghent. Say you can't sleep, though, some night. I would recommend the Treaty of Ghent. But I always say I'm one of the few people who have actually read it through. And I found amazing things in this peace document between Great Britain and the United States. And I found it in Article 9. We promise never to fight anymore. We have never fought against Great Britain since. We're celebrating Normandy. We're celebrating D-Day when we went and we fought for the British, and we fought for the French, and we fought for democracy. It begins here. This is where D-Day begins. We're not going to kill each other anymore. And we're not going to fight with or against the Indians anymore. It's over. The wars on the western frontier are over. We're going to figure out a way to forget everything that happened even before Tippecanoe. We're going to live in peace together. The President of the United States goes out of his mind with joy. His name is James Madison. Little James Madison, who had launched the War of 1812, said, I almost lost the entire West to Tecumseh and the British. Yes, I want peace. I want peace. I don't know how it's going to work. But the United States and these Indian tribes that we've been fighting, since Roanoke and Jamestown, the war's end. The war's end. He sends William Henry Harrison up to Spring Wells. If you ever take I-75 north and you're heading into Detroit, you'll see the sign Spring Wells. That used to be an Indian village. Harrison goes and says to all of Tecumseh's former supporters, including the prophet, we're never going to kill each other again. We're just going to live in peace. We're going to live in peace. William Clark of Lewis and Clark fame, he's now the superintendent of all the Indians out along the Mississippi. He's told, go to a place called Portage de Sioux, write a treaty with every tribe out there and say we're going to live in peace forever. They're signed. Is it going to work? I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. There's a problem. When Tecumseh was putting his confederation together and the War of 1812 was going on, nobody goes west. Now it's 1815, and there's peace, and there's not going to be any war anymore. If you had just a little bit of money, maybe $40, you could cross the Ohio River, you could come to Ohio, you could get gorgeous soil, you could have a farm, 10, 15, 25 acres, and have a tremendous life for yourself. And guess what's going on north of the Ohio? No slavery. Slavery's banned north of the Ohio River. It's going to be a democracy, it's going to be freedom, the American dream, everything. People flood into Ohio in 1815. They come from Great Britain. They come from New England and the mid-Atlantic states where the land is too expensive. Black and whites coming up from the upper south to get land and freedom in Ohio. A British traveler who was traveling through Ohio in 1815, he said, people are on the roads 24 hours a day. I've never seen anything like it. Everybody coming to what is Ohio and its freedom and what it means. The old country is breaking up and moving west to Ohio. Now, you're not going to get a quiz on this. I just want you to think. Okay, Madison retires. He's escaped within an inch of his life. He goes home to Virginia. The new president is going to have to figure out, how do we maintain the peace and also let all these people move into Ohio? What would you do? I'm going to make you president for a minute. Round them up, lock them up. Tell the Americans you can have some land but not all. It's not an easy question to do, but Ohio is going to be a place of experimenting. We're going to figure out a way to live together. And that's what President Monroe does. When I was a kid, I only learned that President Monroe did the Monroe Doctrine. That's all I ever heard about him. I had no idea he was this mastermind of American Indian policy trying to figure out a way we don't kill each other and we all live together and we fulfill the American dream, whatever that is. At this time, it's definitely land. He works with his Secretary of War, a man by the name of John C. Calhoun, who will later become this firebrand for Southern independence. At the moment, he's a great nationalist, and they get an idea. They go, the problem is, when we've gone west as a nation, since Washington's days, we've said, the land, yes, is yours. We've bought it from them. We write all these treaties. We give annuities. We are paying the Indians year after year for their land, and we're trading with them. But when we buy the land, we never tell them where should they live. We assume that the West is so huge that they'll just find someplace else once they've surrendered land. And he goes, okay. I'm going to do things differently. He sends representatives up to where I live, Fort Meigs, out of the Maumee River, where Harrison had defeated Tecumseh. He said, call all the Indians in to this place, the foot of the rapids, and I want you to tell them that when we buy much of Northwest Ohio, we're going to carve out reserves where they're already living, and we're going to say, you can have this land, and you can have it forever. And when the settlers start coming your way, it's all going to work out. It's all going to work out. This had never been done before in American treaty. Let me show you who got what. The Delaware Indians, who had been pushed all the way from the Atlantic, they got a teeny little, about an acre or so of land south of what is now Sandusky. There are only about 40 Delaware still alive in Ohio. The Seneca are given what is now Fremont, Ohio. They're given about 40,000 acres. And again, the Seneca were called the Mingo. They're part of the Iroquois Confederation. They get a huge swatch of great land. Tecumseh's people, the Shawnee, nobody gets punished for fighting with Tecumseh. Nobody's rounded up and killed or anything. We have a forgive and forget policy on all sides. They get Wapakoneta. They also get a place to the north called Hog Creek and a place to the south called Lewistown. If you go there today, Wapakoneta is more famous as the home of Neil Armstrong. As you're coming down I-75 and you see that little moon, go back into the town and you'll see all the signs up. This was a Shawnee Reserve. The Ottawa get East Toledo. That's where my Irish ancestors are going to move when they're running from the potato famine, East Toledo. They also get their villages all the way down the Maumee River and the Blanchard River. And again, this is where the tribes are living. So the US government says, well, if you're living there, we're just gonna kind of take the land ordinance of 1785, which divides the West into 1 mile by 1 mile square blocks, and you get that land. I always say the Wyandotte hit the jackpot. The Wyandotte get a 12 mile by 12 mile square block in what is now Upper Sandusky. If you want to see the quality of the land they get in the springtime, drive from Toledo down to Columbus, and you swing around Upper Sandusky, and they have just turned over the fields, and it is the blackest soil. It's the beginning of the Great Black Belt that's going to go all the way out to Iowa. Now, when the tribes get these lands, and they get money for the land they give up, and they're going to be given money yearly for giving up the land, and they're going to be allowed to trade with the US, Monroe's representatives tell them something. The past is gone. We're not going to fight anymore. You can't be warriors anymore. You can't train your men to kill. Your men are going to have to learn how to be commercial farmers. You're going to have to learn to stay in one place. We will help you. Monroe goes and he sets up a civilization fund. He gets Congress to set aside $10,000, and he said, if you need, do you need a school built? Do you need farms? Should somebody come and show you how to grow the best crops, raise the best livestock? We, the US government, will pay for it. Do you need a church? We'll build it for you. He's kind of put a clock on it, because what he's saying is, a point is coming when all these Americans coming from all over the world are going to be at the edges of your reserve. And Monroe thinks, once those people get up to the edges of your reserve, if you look like farmers and you have villages and you've made this transition to the modern economy, as we would say it, somehow we'll blend together and be one people. That's the dream. Now I'm going to ask you another question. Just imagine you're Delaware, Seneca, Shawnee, Ottawa, or Wyandotte. Just came out of the War of 1812. Everything's forgiven. The past is dead. Are you going to take this deal? Would you stay? I'm naturally cowardly. I hate change. I'm a Scorpio. We don't change. I would stay. I can see that given my personality. A lot of women wanted to stay. They had children. Men was different. They weren't always as happy with this. Think about it again, yourself. You're given a chance. Do you stay or do you go? Not everybody reacts the same way. The Delaware, many of them are now in Indiana, say, we're leaving. We don't want this. Captain Anderson, if you go to Anderson, Indiana, that was an Indian chief, and he said, Mr. Monroe, we're leaving. Get us land in the West and help us go west. He said, we don't want to blend with you. We want to be totally ourselves on our own. We don't want to be part of the United States. They go. The Seneca and Fremont say, this is great. We will have the greatest farms in the world. Don't come near us. We don't want your churches, your schools, or any of that. We'll do it on our own. We'll be better farmers than any of you can imagine. The Ottawa, who are living along the Maumee River in my neck of the woods, they say nobody would want the Maumee River. No, nobody's coming into this swampy country. We can just keep farming and hunting and trading. Nothing will ever change. They all looked at it differently. Presbyterian ministers just came on their own, came down the Maumee River, and they set up a mission just kind of in between where Waterville and Grand Rapids, Ohio are. And they set up a mission in a school. And they set up a farm. And there's no, you must come. It's just, if you want to learn, bring your children. Ottawa children, Shawnee children. The children of settlers went to this school. It's been torn down now, but they were trying. It's just like, let's see if we can make a new life. The Shawnee, Tecumseh's people, they're now led by a very old chief by the name of Blackhawk, who hated Tecumseh. He said, I'm glad he's defeated. I'll take the deal. And they asked the Quakers to come and help them. A family by the name of the Harveys, a young man named Henry Harvey, they come and they help the Shawnee. They help them build farms. They help them build a mill where they can grind corn. They build a manual school where they can train them. The Shawnee say, we'll take everything you can send us. No religion. We only like the Quakers. The Quakers actually practice their faith, but the rest of you, we don't know what it is, but you are not Christians as we can understand it. But the Shawnee say, we'll do it. The Wyandottes embrace this change more than anybody. They say, this is tremendous. Maybe not all of them, but a good portion of them say, this is a dream life for us. It's a fascinating story. Just as all this is happening and Monroe is starting his new policy, a young man by the name of John Stewart, who is the son of manumitted slaves from Virginia, has a dream, and God tells him to go north. It's about 1816, 1817, right about the time this big treaty at the foot of the rapids is going through, and he walks from Marietta, Ohio, and he walks all the way up to Upper Sandusky. And he just walks in and said, God sent me. What can I do? And he begins preaching, and he has a gorgeous voice, and he preaches and he teaches them the Methodist faith, and people start converting to the Methodist faith. Many of the Wyandot had been Catholic, but there were no priests after the French and Indian War to come minister to them. He eventually gets tuberculosis. So the Methodists send that man up in the corner, James Finley, a minister. He comes about 1821, and he is told, just go out there, do what you can to help the Wyandot. Don't ask them to help you. You build a farm, you build a school, you do whatever they ask, whatever they need. And eventually, he went to the government of the United States and asked John C. Calhoun, can we build a church, a Methodist church? You can go to Upper Sandusky today, go to the center of town. On Sundays, they're having people come, well, the Wyandot, descendants of the Wyandot come from Kansas and Oklahoma to pray there. That church was built by the US government. That's, again, this is a replica. The original fell apart. But many of these great young chiefs, like Mononkew on the left, between the logs on the right, they convert to Methodism and they become preachers themselves. And then the Methodists take them all over the country to preach. They love the Methodist faith not just because of what it teaches about Christ, but they said, the Methodists don't drink. We got trouble with alcohol out west. And if you become a Methodist, you take a pledge not to drink and not to be violent and not to get in a drunken rage and kill your wife and your children. Between the logs, when he was drunk, killed his own wife in a fit of anger. And they believe that the Methodists will get them on track. Almost overnight, the Wyandot are going to become the most successful farmers in Ohio. Upper Sandusky will look like the pride of the United States of America. It is going to be that beautiful in terms of the farms that go up, the livestock that's being raised. The children are educated. Many go on to become not just ministers. From that little school, they go on to become lawyers. So it's a tremendous success. So 5 tribes kind of moving in 5 different directions. I ask you another question. I think things are going great. Maybe because I am English and Irish. I mean, if those 2 group of people can intermarry and have children and grandchildren, there's hope for us all. I like this setup. I like what Monroe has done. Who do you suppose would oppose it? There's no right answer, because I'm going to tell you what I thought, and I was wrong. So, you know what I would think? I would think the Americans. I would think the settlers all around him would be furious at seeing the success. And so when I go down like, just jealousy, look at that beautiful, you know, white supremacy, all that stuff. You hear about it 24 hours a day. I go to the Library of Congress, and they drag out the big books for me, but the main place you have to go to study this is the National Archives. Oh, you got to go down in the basement at the National Archives. Everything that ever happened to American Indians is recorded. Imagine like about half of that wall with thin drawers, you have to pull it out, microfilm. Oh, that's fun. Reading, I go, why? I don't think anybody's ever been down here reading this. What actually happened to the tribes in Ohio? And when I was stunned to find out, it wasn't the settlers. Settlers weren't upset. Nobody in Ohio was upset. There was a kind of general, this is great, we're all in this together. The tribes themselves demanded removal, especially among the Shawnee. Shawnee chiefs, like Colonel Lewis, and the prophet, who was still alive, just went wild. They hated this whole setup. The prophet got on his big white horse and he went all over the Shawnee Reserve saying, this is what Tecumseh wanted for us? We fought with Tecumseh so we could be nice, cleaned up little white boy farmers? I don't want this. I want to go west. He demands that the government send the Shawnee west. Colonel Lewis has an idea. He says, how about we all move to Arkansas? He travels to the Arkansas Territory and he sees the Cherokee are living there with all these different tribes, and he goes, how about we all move, we leave Ohio, we go there. Yeah, the women can still farm, but we men, we can be warriors. We can go fight those crazy buffalo hunting, feathered, wild Indians of the plains. Let's go. He goes to Monroe, send us west. We've got to leave. He goes to the Shawnee, let's go. Territorial officials who had been young men during the War of 1812, like William Clark, like Lewis Cass, he's the governor of the Michigan Territory, the Indian agent out here in Ohio, a guy made the name of John Johnston, they get in on it too. They go, we don't really like seeing Indian men transforming into American farmers. It's not affecting everybody in a good way. They saw many Indian men becoming total drunkards and leaving their families into poverty, and they say, we think the Indians should be what they had always been. There's kind of a nostalgia in this. They begin the drumbeat to Monroe. Send everybody west. Send everybody west. Send everybody west. I sometimes shake my head. If we had the media then that we have now, I think things would have turned out otherwise. But the loudest voices of removal, again, come from men who are out on the frontier and who like that old way of doing things. The Seneca, who are a success on the reserve, go to the US government and say, you've got to send us west. We have the farms, it looks beautiful, we've got livestock, everything's great, we are a good, perfect American village, and we don't want to be near you anymore. They begin to feel the pressure of the American settlers coming their way, and they say, maybe there are a lot of good farm families among you, but a lot of those early pioneers are violent and cruel. We want to get away from them. Americans are bringing diseases. One of the worst diseases is the flu. Influenza is wiping out people on the reserves. Measles is a terrible, terrible scourge. They say, you guys, no matter where you are, no matter where we are, you bring alcohol and you sell it to us. You love it. We take a drop of it and it destroys our lives. We have to get away from that. But they also started to say, do we run our own reserves? Do we run our own reservations? Or does American law run it? If American law runs it, then we have no identity. We have to get out of here. So the Seneca, who on the surface are a success, they go to Monroe. They beg him, send us west. Send us west. Monroe throws up his hands in despair. After 2 terms, he said, I blew it in the west. That treaty at the foot of the rapids was really stupid. The Indians don't like it. They seem to all be unhappy. He goes to Congress and he says, I got 4 petitions from the Seneca to leave. I think we should remove all the Indians and ship them west of the Mississippi River. He leaves. He goes back to Virginia. John Quincy Adams, very brilliant man from Massachusetts, becomes president. John Quincy Adams reads all the reports and he says, Indian removal, ship them west. We're doing more damage to them than good. His Secretary of the War, by the name of James Barber, a man, I swear to God, having a PhD, I'd never heard of this man before. You know, we're taking down statues. We must put one up to this man. Here, I'm going to make the case for him. James Barber, his Secretary of War, says, why don't we go to every tribe and ask them what they would like to do? He said, nobody had thought of that. Why don't we go ask all the Shawnee, would you like to stay? How can we help you? Would you like to go west? Where would you like to go? Let us help you. If some of the Wyandot want to stay, can't we help them? If some want to go, can't we help them? And John Quincy Adams says, go ahead, try to create a policy. Barber also comes up with another idea. He said, how about we go up around Wisconsin Let's go down around Oklahoma. Those are just big open territories now. And let's make them true American Indian territories. If you want to go west, go up towards Wisconsin. If you want to go west, go down towards Oklahoma. And then you go through the 3 stages of development and you become a state. So there'd be the state of Minnesota, which would be Indian people, but they'd be American citizens. And then there'd be Oklahoma, and they'll be under the Constitution. And they'll be protected from anybody coming their way. I'm not kidding. When I stumbled onto this, I said, why didn't everybody listen to him? I like that idea. I don't think Tecumseh's followers would have liked it, but at least he tried. It comes to nothing. We're back with Jackson. We're now 1830. It's been about a dozen years as this experiment's been going on in the West, and Jackson says the experiment's over. I'm going to pass a law to remove the Indians this side of the Mississippi to the west. They're going to exchange land, and don't argue with me about it. When I try to figure out why he did this, most people simply say, he's a racist, we hate it. No, there's some thought in this. He absolutely hated the idea that there were these Indian nations within the United States. He hated it. We're all going to be Americans. You want to stay here, you become an American citizen. You want to continue your identity as an Indian, you get out of this country. He will treat the tribes the way he treats the Southern nullifiers. Don't think you're leaving the United States. He's also the common man candidate. He's promising opportunity for all. He's going to take that 100 million acres that he can get from the Indians, open it for sale. Again, maybe $1 an acre. Maybe with preemption, you can get on that Indian land, it's yours for free. That's what he's promised the American people he will give them. There's trouble in Georgia. The Cherokee who have stayed in Georgia, most of them are cotton planting slaveholders. And the surrounding slaveholders want that land. He's like, Cherokee, you gotta get out of Georgia. We're gonna have a civil war down there. He also has bad memories of Tecumseh. He never forgave the Indians for following Tecumseh. He hates the British, not the Indians. And he said, you nearly destroyed this country in the War of 1812. You deserve to be defeated. He passes his law. There is a revolt in Ohio. When Andrew Jackson lays out his Indian Removal Act in 1830, it's not like everybody said, hip hip hooray, let's get rid of the Indians. He had a fight on his hand. Our 2 senators, Jacob Burnett and Benjamin Ruggles, voted against it and told Jackson, you're out of your mind. They would tell him that when he tried to destroy the Bank of the U.S., you're out of your mind. Every person in the House of Representatives in Ohio who had an Indian reserve in their land, in their district, voted against it. It was 12-2 against it. Only Jackson's big supporters around Cincinnati were for it. Ohio, I feel we can be proud of this. I do not see, I say stay, blend, we'll be all right. If you want to have some fun, type in ladies of Steubenville. I found this years ago because people throughout Ohio petitioned the government, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. One group was called the Ladies of Steubenville. It used to be an obscure thing, now it's very famous. Teenage girls and young girls in their 20s wrote to the government a gorgeous petition. It's in the congressional record, begging Jackson not to do this. Do not do this. We'll never be forgiven for this. Give them time. We'll all blend together someday. You don't need to do this removal. Jackson didn't listen. He passes it, and one thing he says is, and again, I'm watching my watch, now we can begin the removal. The Seneca were overjoyed. And Jackson said, hey, what's everybody complaining about in Ohio? The Seneca want to leave. The Seneca signed a treaty in 1831 with the government, and they say, we're going to leave Fremont, and we're going to get that little piece of territory right there in northeast Oklahoma. One thing that's not in the Jackson Removal Act, how do you move 400 people? Can you imagine moving 400 people today? The trauma. There's no mechanism to move people. It's just your land's there, go get it. The Seneca have an Indian agent by the name of Henry Brish who simply says, I'm going to sell all of your property. I'm going to get some wagons, and We're going to go west. We're either going to walk west or maybe we'll get on some steamboats. Let's start going. No plan, just let's do it. This is how they go. I want you to look at the dates and the numbers. Look at the day they leave. Would anybody in their right mind leave to walk? Would you want to walk from Ohio to Oklahoma starting in November? They start in November. Henry Brish will say, I was stupid how I put this together. Look at when they arrive, July the 4th. It's going to take them 8 months. We're looking at about 400 people, mainly Seneca, but also Delaware, and they simply say, okay, let's go. They're like pioneers. They leave the Seneca Reserve. They come all the way down to just north of Dayton. A group of people who are going to go by wagon train start heading west. In Muncie, Indiana, they run into winter weather already, and they simply stop. The rest of the the Seneca and Delaware who want to go by steamboat, they get to Dayton. They want to get on the canal and then a steamboat and come west. And the canal operators say, you can't take your horses with you. No horses. They've sold all their livestock, but their prime horses are now sold off for pennies on the dollar. It's a horrible tragedy. Horrible tragedy. Again, nobody has figured this out. They get on the boats, they come, they finally meet up in St. Louis, but a lot of people died. A lot of people are lost. And Henry Brish said, this is the most terrible thing I could have done to these people that I love so much. I got to tell you one story. William Clark, who wanted this, he's out in St. Louis. And the Seneca finally make it to St. Louis, and they come to him and they say, where do we put our stuff? And he says to himself, what could children of the forest kind of stuff could they have? He can't comprehend that they were successful farmers. And he says, oh, just go up along the Mississippi, you'll find some warehouse, and put your stuff there. Later in the day, he went to the warehouse and he walked in and he describes it in letters and reports to the government. He said, their stuff was in crates stacked to the ceiling. I opened it up, it was iron plows. These people were successful farmers. How could I ever be stupid enough to be for Indian removal? They had transformed. And he reached in and he grabbed peach pits. And he looked at them and he said, my God, they left orchards behind. What have I done? He regretted it. Henry Brish regretted what they had done. But the Seneca, goodbye, Ohio. Off they go to Oklahoma. There's a national outcry. So many Seneca died. So many Choctaw. The Choctaw are leaving too. They die by the thousands. And people say to Jackson, you idiot, when you passed this law, you didn't have a mechanism. You just said, go. The land will be out there. So he has to turn to Lewis Cass, his Secretary of War, and his Secretary of War has to come up with a plan. He goes, okay, we'll sign a removal treaty. We'll give up land here. We'll go there. We'll get a superintendent. We'll hire an American to lead you west. We'll get a guy called a dispersing agent. We'll get a young kid out of West Point, a military officer. He's in charge of the food. We buy the food. We buy the wagons, the U.S. government, and we walk with you. We'll conduct you west, and we'll stay with you for a year. That tamps down some of the outcry against Jackson. That's how the Shawnee are going to go west. They're not going to go on their own. In 1831, a man by the name of James Gardner, who got a job from Jackson to convince the tribes to go west, he comes and he starts talking to the Shawnee. There are about 800 of them. And he said, really, you got to get out of here, because I'm telling you, the Americans are violent. They're going to take this land away from you. They put great pressure on the Shawnee. The Shawnee chief Blackhoof is about 120 years old. He dies. And the Shawnee take that as a sign. We have to get out of here. At least we can stay together. Let's go west. Where are they going to go? The Shawnee, who are coming from Wapakoneta and to the north, in Hog Creek, and some who are going to leave from Missouri, they're going to live just south of the Kansas River in what is now Kansas. Shawnee and Seneca, who are down at Lewistown, they're going to go down to Oklahoma. This is quite an enterprise. This is quite an enterprise. You're going to have to move 800 people, and they're going to go west by wagon train. But again, Americans are hired to go with them. Americans are hired to get the food. They're going to supposedly protect them. this is my favorite story of Indian removal. The Shawnee tell Andrew Jackson, we're taking our horses with us. No selling them. We don't care how we're going, but don't you think you can take our horses away from us? And Jackson, for once, said, all right, you can take your horses, but you better be quick about it, because I'm only paying $10 or so a person to ship you guys west. But the Shawnee stood up to him. Here's how they go. I want you to imagine wagon trains, 800 people. The men who go west with them keep perfect records of this. It's a long multi-mile long wagon train, and they leave. They come out to Greenville. They head out along the National Road. They go past, they get out to a place called Hickory Grove out in Illinois, and then they split in two. Some go off to Kansas. Some are going to go all the way down to Oklahoma. Halfway through Indiana, they run out of food. Americans didn't buy enough. The Americans turn to the Shawnee and say, could you start hunting? Because we are out of food. They have to start selling their clothes to settlers. They're out of food. It gets better once they get to Illinois, because now they can really do some serious hunting. There's still some buffalo. There are a lot of deer. But it's the hunting of the Shawnee who keeps them going. But look at the death toll. It's high. They leave in September, arriving in November, leave in September, arriving in December. Upwards of 140, 170 die. The weather's bad, and guess what else is striking at this time? Cholera. For the first time in history, this awful Asian disease, it gets into the soil and makes you, you have diarrhea and you dehydrate. It's horrible. It's made its way to America, and many will die in the cholera epidemic. Okay. I have to tell you one neat thing when you read the eyewitness accounts of these young men who went west for the Shawnee. When they start leaving Ohio, come on, speed it up, get in the wagons, go on, let's go, we gotta go west. As they start traveling west with the Shawnee, they start to really like them and to admire them. By the time they get out to Oklahoma, in Kansas, they are pro-Shawnee. They think they're the greatest people in the world. And they talk about the women. They go, the women. I mean, everybody's walking, except the very old and very sick. They're walking. Women are 9 months pregnant. They stop, get in the wagon, next day, out of the wagon, got the baby, smiling, walking west. And these American men are just like, my God, who are these spectacular people? The Shawnee make it to the west. They never look back. All these tribes, once we're out there, goodbye forever. I go forward. We're now in the late 1830s. Only two tribes are left, the Ottawa. I have to tell you, the most shocking thing I found about the Ottawa was, by the late 1830s, they had no land. Most of the adults were either dead from drunkenness or disease, and they were primarily a tribe of children. The Ottawa were not supposed to sell their land to anybody but the U.S. government. They sold it to anybody who asked them. By 1837, they have no land. They're just wandering around what is now East Toledo. They're wandering around in small groups up and down the Maumee River. And a judge in Maumee, Ohio, steps in and says, if we don't do something now, we don't get a treaty, we don't get these people out of Ohio, these children will die. So in 1837, he steps forward and he said, I'll lead almost a children's crusade. I'll take one little group, about 100 people, about 80 of them are kids. He comes back in 1839 and he says, I'll take the next group. 6 out of 10 of these people are kids. And he said, this is how I'm going to get them west fast. No walking across Indiana. He says, I'm going to take these people, mainly children. I'm going to get them on a steamboat, get them to Cleveland. They're going to come down the canals. I'm going to go with them, and we're going to get on steamboats, and we're going to go out to their country, out to Ottawa country, near the Shawnee. The eyewitness accounts of Americans crying when all these children are placed on boats is stunning, but I actually don't know what else could have been done. It's a tragic time in the history of the Ottawa. The Ottawa survive, and they're with us to this very day. Okay. The last tribe who does not want to go are the Wyandot. A few more minutes. I'm watching my watch. The Wyandot are still in Ohio in the early 1840s. Jackson's long gone. Harrison is come and gone. Van Buren's come and gone. Tyler is now president. And they think maybe we can just wait it out. 3 times the U.S. government comes to them and says, leave. 1831, 1834, 1841. 1831, Gardner comes to them and says, I want you guys to go west. A very brilliant young man by the name of William Walker, who is one of their lead lawyers, a young Wyandot, he says, okay, I'll go west, but you got to take me there first. Show me the magic that is Kansas. And if I like it, we'll go. So in 1831, Walker leads a small party to Kansas, and he said, it's hot, it's dry, there are no animals. And he said, the Indians out here are crazy. They're on horseback chasing buffalo. What do I have in common with them? And he also says, I see a lot of slaveholders coming this way. I see a lot of slaves coming this way. I see people who want free farms. He goes, Kansas is going to be the site of the Civil War starting in this country. He sees bleeding Kansas 10 years in advance. He said, we're not going. All right. 3 years later, Governor Lucas, the governor of Ohio, great Jackson supporter, comes right back to Upper Sandusky, lays out all the maps. You got to see Kansas. It's so beautiful. The Wyandots say, if it's that beautiful, Governor Lucas, why don't you move there? How about that? And they also tell him something, a young guy by the name of Samundawat, a young chief, very not a trying to be modern, still living mainly by hunting. He stands up and he says, you know, when we signed that treaty at the foot of the rapids, there was a young guy there who told us, when the U.S. government comes to try to buy your land, don't sell it. He said, that was Lewis Cass. He happens to be the Secretary of War right now. So if the Secretary of War, when he was a young man, told us, don't sell it, we're not selling it now. Lucas gives up. Okay, all right, fine. In 1841, that John Johnston comes back, the local Indian agent, and he says, you have to get out of here because the violence is coming your way. The misery that you see in Georgia, the fighting over that cotton land, it's going to happen in Upper Sandusky because you got the prime real estate in Ohio. They keep taking votes. No, we don't want to go. And this is how they voted. Imagine we're all Wyandotte. Imagine we are in our council house. This is how we vote. Who wants to stay in Ohio? We come to this side of the building. Who wants to leave Ohio? We go to that side of the building. It's always slightly more, let's stay in Ohio. And then something happens. In the fall of 1841, Samundawat, this young, brave chief who stood up and said, if you like Kansas so much, you move there. He's murdered by American hunters in Henry County. He's out hunting. It's the fall. He's with his, I think, brother-in-law and his brother-in-law's wife, and he invites these 2 young hunters, American settlers, to just come and spend the night. They kill him in the middle of the night. Those 2 guys are arrested. They escape. That's what does it. The Wyandotte says, we've had it. We want to stay together, and we're going to leave together. The day they take their vote, Charles Dickens happens to be in Upper Sandusky. He's on one of his tours through America, and he said, I saw these men weeping. They had just voted to go west. He doesn't know anything about American Indians. He doesn't know that they've got this spectacular reserve. He gets on his carriage. He goes up to Sandusky to take a lake steamer, and he looks at the beautiful farms of the Wyandotte, and he said, now, if those pesky Indians could only create a town like this, then they could stay. There's this weird nostalgia we have about American Indians. We want them locked in the past, and we didn't even recognize how tremendous they were. Again, I've spoken to Wendat conferences in Canada where many Wyandotte Indians are very upset about what happened to them, and I always go, you study these Ohio Wyandotte, you'll be proud you're descendants of them. I spoke to the Wyandotte of Kansas also. I went out to Kansas once, and I always say, all these people are tremendous, but your ancestors are particularly tremendous. This is what the Wyandotte do. They have about 700 people. Most of them are adults. They sign a treaty of removal. We're going, but then they tell the government, stay away from us. So we're, buy all our improvements. We're going to take that money. We'll buy the land out west. We'll pick it. We don't need you to pick it. Don't send us a conductor. Don't send us a superintendent. They, without any help from the government, they planned the trip west. They sell off all their property. Again, they take that money. They go, we'll buy land out west. They buy buggies. They buy wagons. And they buy tickets. They go, we're going to go down to Cincinnati. We're going to take steamboats. We're going to get out to Kansas. Goodbye forever. And they pick the date. My God, finally an intelligent date to leave, to go west. They go on July the 12th, 1843, all on their own. If you want to get a sense of where they were traveling, if you've ever been down Ohio 68, going from about, Bellefontaine, coming down to Xenia, that's an old warrior road, Shawnee Warrior Road. Everybody is in beautiful buggies. Everybody's beautifully dressed. They're bringing all their people west. Eyewitnesses come out to watch them. Newspapermen come out to watch them. And they can't comprehend what they're seeing. It's like, well, these people look like American farmers. What are these well-dressed, wealthy people doing coming this way? Well, they did what America had wanted them to do. And now they were being sent west. And the other amazing thing is that when these newsmen would go back and write their stories, they would say, gentle children of the forest. They will have campfires and they will hunt the buffalo and they will ask the Great Spirit for help. And I'm going, my God, they're Methodist. My God. I've been thinking about us a lot as Americans lately. Again, we're very nostalgic with the tribes. We want to lock them in a past. Even now, we demand that if you're of Native American descent. Are you chasing whales? Are you doing what your ancestors did? They don't get to move with the rest of us. Look at how they did it. No loss of life. No loss of life. Where do they go? They buy land from the Delaware right there on the border of Kansas and Missouri. Overnight, Kansas City, Kansas is founded. They found that town. Overnight, there are farms, shops, schools, churches, anything you would need. And then, again, the Wyandot of Kansas, the Wyandot of Oklahoma, all these tribes are still with us. And that's one thing Jackson and Jackson's supporters often say. But they're still with us. They got to keep their identity. They didn't get mushed in with the rest of us. I'm not so certain about that. I think it could have been otherwise. I'm at the end. One sad thing about the Wyandot, when they get out to Kansas, again, it's 1843, 44, 45, what they predicted comes true. Civil war breaks out in Kansas, doesn't it? As the slaveholders and the free farmers and the runaway slaves start fighting in bloody Kansas, that never stops until we go into our own civil war. And it's coming. It's coming. When the Wyandot are leaving, they're gathering in that church that, again, the U.S. government had built for them. The settlers in the surrounding area come and are weeping. Don't go, stay. A great chief by the name of Squire Gray Eyes steps forward and he says something amazing because he goes, come on, we're all Christians, aren't we? We'll meet in the next life. This is not our home. It's not our permanent home. And I sometimes think, was he also saying, we'll settle this in the next life. Who's to blame for what? But we're leaving, and we're going to be one people. His little daughter went to the school. Her name was Margaret Gray Eyes. That's a picture of her when she was an older lady. She had gone to the mission school set up by Finley. And she goes out west, and when she's a much older lady, she moves back to Ohio. Not all the Wyandot leave, and many of them come back. But I told you this has been bothering me. Let me just read you one last thing. Because when I studied all the people going to Kansas, guess who I found out there? I found my Bohemian ancestors. Every place we are, somebody was there before us. And even all these tribes, somebody was in Ohio before them. I'm Irish and English on my father's side. I'm Polish and Bohemian. Now it's the Czech Republic. And we came, the Irish are coming in the potato famine. but the Bohemians are coming in the 1870s when U.S. Grant says, everybody can be a citizen, American Indians, blacks, and all you horrible Europeans, you poverty-stricken peasants. But some of my ancestors settled in Toledo, some went up to Petersburg, Michigan, some went out to Kansas, and they got Indian land, because by then the Indians are going to be dispersed. But to find, to be looking for the Walker family and the children of Squire Gray Eyes, and to find my family, the DeLabels, pitiful farmers. I think we're all kind of pitiful people in America finding our dream. But it left me wondering, what makes American history so challenging to write is not the fact that the stories of so many people have been forgotten, even when all the threads of the past are drawn together. Tragedy remains. The suffering of one group of people, the Delaware, Seneca, Shawnee, Ottawa, Wyandotte, often gives rise to the triumphs of another, my family. Like the millions of farmers, town people, factory workers, and city dwellers who filled up Ohio, left behind by the tribes. Until we have figured out a way for all Americans to live side by side, fulfilling personal dreams for a better future, but never at the expense of someone else, we will be left wondering with Squire Gray Eyes, who is now buried in the Indian Cemetery in Kansas City, Kansas, if the consequences of the immense tragedies we bring into our lives, to the lives of one another, will ever be resolved in time or in eternity. Just sort of left me leaving there. That's where I would leave you. Think about when did your ancestors get here? Who pushed who out? And amazingly, we're all together. The tribes are all American citizens. In Kansas, very quickly, but in the United States, we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act. All people of Native American descent have been American citizens. 10 years after that, FDR says something amazing. He passes the Indian Reorganization Act, and he says, go get some land, build your reserves, have government, celebrate your heritage. It's possible to be Shawnee and to be American, just like me. It's possible to be Irish, Polish, all these crazy people who hated each other in Europe. Here we can try to figure out a way to live together. I'll stop. Not too bad. Not too bad. Thank God I brought my watch.
Thank you very, very much. First of all, I know it got cold in here. I really apologize for that, but servicing the air conditioning, so at the time that we're in here, so apologies. So I have one mic. I'm going to take Q&A, and because it's just me, how if I start here at the beginning and work my way back? Questions? Okay.
It's more of a statement. I grew up in the area you're talking about, Miami Manor, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
You were right next to Fort Miami. So
Yes,
yeah.
used to take my bicycle as a kid. Now I am 80, so this is a while ago. To Indian Hills, and we would ride our bikes over the mounds, and we had ruts in them. And I think of that today. I think, oh my gosh, I think it's preserved today. I don't think that happens.
Yeah, Fort Miami's is preserved today. It's a big dog park, and people go there walking their dogs. And when I walk through it, I always go, how did Indians or British soldiers build something that lasts? And I can't put a path in my garden without it washing away. So it's like, oh my God. But it's very exciting. It's a very, very big place now in Maumee, southern Toledo.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what happened to the Ohio Indians that went, particularly to Kansas, which had all the problems with bleeding Kansas.
Yeah. Very quickly, what is the question? I actually met the former president of the Kansas Historical Society who said, now you have to write this story next. And I said, this story's too tragic. This story's a mess. Very quickly, here come the American settlers. Here come railroad companies right away. And railroad companies just start to buy out everything out from under the Indians. Most of the tribes lose their land pretty quickly. Many say it's not working out, let's go to the Indian Territory. So the Wyandotte split in two. Some remain, become citizens of Kansas and stay and get blended in with the rest of it. Others go down to the Indian Territory. For a long time, Oklahoma, until the 1880s, is going to be a pure Indian territory. But when they go down there, the Civil War breaks out there too. And the tribes have to decide, Union or Confederacy. So most of these tribes will hang on to just a little bit of their land. They won't start rebuilding their identity really as tribes until FDR becomes president. So it's not a pretty story. They fight over slavery too, but I'm not bringing that up because the Wyandotte at the moment are heroes.
Couple comments. I live in Maumee, Ohio. So I just want to recommend going to Fort Meigs. We were just there, did the lantern walk over Mother's Day, and it's a nighttime walk, and there's so much more history. You haven't begun to touch it, so I encourage everyone. Also, my son just bought 400 acres in Iowa, and I said, why not Ohio? And he says, Mom, the land is so good here and that, but he says, the taxes, he says, and the Chinese are buying it up.
Oh,
so the ironic stuff is now other nations are taking our land.
Yeah, and there are bills pending everywhere. You know, you can't sell to a foreigner. But I feel like we got to wake up about agriculture, how significant it is. I think we're living in our phones in another universe right now, and we're forgetting who we are almost as a nation. That's just my observation. I don't want to sound like an old crank, but I see it. But Fort Meigs, I got to go to Fort Meigs a lot when I was a child. It was where Harrison built his fort, and then the British in Tecumseh came and bashed. You know, it had two assaults on it, but Harrison won those battles. The only reason I got to go there was because my father said it was one place where the British were defeated. And so we got to go, we had to walk around, yes, Dad, what did the British do here? That Tecumseh was there fighting, I didn't find out till I went to college. But it's a beautiful spot, and imagine it in 1813 as we're fighting who gets Ohio, who gets the Midwest.
Well, I found out the reason the fort was built there was no bridges back in those days, and the Maumee River at that place was the lowest of the Maumee River along that whole place, so that's how they would cross over at the Maumee River right
and that's
there.
the foot of the rapids. Yeah. The rapids go from what is Fort Meigs, then they head south all the way up to Grand Rapids. No boat can go down that. And so that's why Harrison stopped there too. And it was like, I gotta beat him here, and maybe we win back the Ohio country, and then I gotta chase Tecumseh into Canada. It's quite a story. Well, my gosh, Put-in Bay, the Battle of Lake Erie. Harrison wins on land, defeats Tecumseh. Tecumseh runs into Canada, and the big battle is fought. The Americans defeat the British on the lake. And that famous message, we have met the enemy and they are ours, Oliver Hazard Perry sends that to Harrison. And it's green light, let's go get Tecumseh. What a story. We're in a very historic, dramatic country.
Hey guys, John got here, so he can take a question from that side if anybody has one. Over there. No? Okay.
See? And Jean, I should make you answer those questions, but that's what I would do to torture my students. It was, okay, what would you do at this point? What would you do at that point? What would you do at that point? And I always find that if you start thinking of history that way, suddenly it all kind of, oh my gosh, the good and the evil that we seem to be obsessed with now, it all disappears, and I go, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know what I would have done, but it impressed me that Ohio was trying, and Ohio didn't want the removal. We fought it. So when people tell you that everybody wanted this removal, you can all raise your hand proudly and say, not Ohio, not Ohio. We wanted blending. We got to figure out a way to live together. So.
Well, speaking of the information being on the tip of the iceberg, Mary has a book. It's for sale over in the bookstore, and it's about this thick. There's a lot of stuff in there.
Oh,
if you want to get more. And I know a lot of you have bought the book already because it had really good sales. So yeah.
Excellent. I also wrote a precursor to this. I wrote a book called Unlikely General, Mad Anthony Wayne and the Fight for America, and that goes back to previous generation when this was truly Indian country. This was truly the country of the British, and George Washington had to find some poor soul to raise an army and come out here and to see if he could win it for this country. And he takes Anthony Wayne. And we think of Anthony Wayne as this madman who loved to fight. I read all of his letters. He was terrified coming west, never thought he would win. Thought the Indians were the greatest fighters and diplomats in the world. he still almost went to his death, never quite believing that he had won the Battle of Fallen Timbers and gotten the Treaty of Greenville. But another person, again, who's being vilified right now, and he thought he thought somebody like Little Turtle was greater than George Washington. So sometimes people who are fighting each other greatly admire each other. That's something that, again, we're not catching in our history anymore. That was quite a book.
Okay, any more question? Any other question?
I did.
Okay,
15
awesome.
minutes
Thank
to
you so
spare.
much.
Hey, come on. Go get lunch.